All right, wonderful. Thank you for coming out for another Villages talk. We have Sacha today, a director of engineering at Grammarly. So I'll let him take it away. That way we can jump right in. Quick round of applause.
Thank you. All right, this is working. Thanks for the Code Red folks and B-Side also for starting this event. When I was approached to do this presentation, I honestly didn't quite know what to present on. Am I going to go super technical or not? And as I started reflecting, and especially Grammarly is in a hiring boom, I'm doing a lot of interviews. I was like, why don't I share like common mistakes people are doing, in my opinion. Some of the people do very well and suddenly hit a wall. So this presentation is really about, it's not about like the technical skills, it's really around how do you prepare. How do you actually prepare for the interview? How do you structure your answer? Passing an interview is a skill. I have said no to people I legitimately think are very talented, but they could not deliver on the interview. It didn't surface on the interview. Either they were too humble, or they were the contrary or that, a little bit kind of a dick, or not the nicest people. So it's like really about how to improve that. This presentation, and I just, as a quick thing, it's not for people just looking for a job. This is for people looking at their career. I think most of you are looking at a career, you're not just looking for a quick job. It applies for people looking for a quick job, but it's mostly applied for career and landing those roles that are so important. As I mentioned, the main thing is about planning. You have to organize. You have to understand who the company is. You have to understand what the role is as well. So planning is everything. There's couple of tricks out there. I think the STAR method in terms of answering question and structuring question works very well. I see people use it. What is the situation? What are the tasks that you've done? What are the actions? And don't forget the results, right? So I see a lot of people start, oh yeah, we did this and that. How was that measured? What was the impact and so on? They come in empty-handed, or they didn't structure enough where they run out of time to actually go highlight that. So the STAR method works out pretty well. And come up with some, there's certain things that you cannot predict in terms of which coding questions you're going to be asked and so on. But there's certain things that you can control or anticipate. For example, start writing case studies around what project you've been the most proud of in your career. That is actually a case study. You can really sit down and think through about that. What project you delivered that had the highest impact, that may not be the project you're the most proud of. One of the projects I'm the most proud of has been a consistent failure. I'm still trying to hit it, right? But I keep trying it. The project I've had the most impacts are completely different. What is the project you bombed? What project did you make critical mistakes? What project that was a complete failure or delayed and so on? Work on those case studies. All the interviews at larger company, more established company, and even the smaller ones are going to ask questions around that, right? High impact, most proud of, the one you failed, right? Let's talk about that. Knowing the employer as well is extremely important, right? A lot of the employers out there are actually sharing their core values. That is an indicator to you and to everyone who they are, what they focus on. Right, so I'll give a few examples of past employment for me. Lift, right? Lift is be yourself, uplift others, and make it happen. When you walk through your case studies, connect the dots there. When did I actually be yourself? It's one of my favorite ones. We hired you for a reason. We want you to speak up. Don't hide in a corner, right? You're there for a reason. Uplift others. How do you bring on and help somebody failing? One of my interview questions at Lyft is, what do you do when you see a team about to fail? What do you do when you think a team is failing and they don't realize it? Right? There's a depth to that question. By the way, these were questions on the individual contributor interview, not even a manager interview. Right? Make it happen. Get it done. What did you do to make it happen? Keep pushing it. I see two seasoned lifters out here. We went through this, right? Another one, company which is notorious for their many leadership principles, Amazon, right? They break down for you ahead of time exactly how to structure your interviews. By the way, a good question to ask your Amazon recruiter, what are the top 2 or 3 leadership principles the team you're interviewing with are focusing on? I cannot, and actually I told the recruiter at the time, listen, you got 14 leadership principles. I'm a busy guy, I want to prepare, but which one should I focus on, right? So the organization I was interviewing for, they mentioned to me, bias for action, right? Invent and simplify. This is like heavy engineering where we're rebuilding the payment infrastructure from scratch, right? From on-premise to actually cloud. Invent and simplify was one of the key one. And ownership. Nothing is beneath you. When did you actually show up and show through ownership of helping others, moving things along? If something needs to be picked up on the floor, like you go do it. That's really ownership, right? So you can ask these questions. And then Grammarly, we are coming up with leadership principle. Right now, we only share our core value is the eager value, right? When was, like in your case study about project the most proud of or failure, or what is the coolest bug you've ever found? This is a common question I keep asking. How do you connect the dots around being ethical, right? Being honorable, earn trust, adaptable. How are you learning through failures? Greedy, show perseverance and long-term goals. Empathetic, very similar to uplift others at Lyft. How do you actually help other people when you see them fail or when you think they need help? They don't need to ask you, actually proactively go do that. And be remarkable. When nobody is looking, do you actually do the right thing? Are you learning? Are you humble? So the companies that are sharing those core values gives you sort of a, here's how we think. Build your case study, take notes. When I did my interview, I remember at Amazon, which was my last interview in person, right before COVID, I came with a stack of notes. There's not cheat sheet, I just showed up prepared. So for each of the interviews, when I started getting hints that, they were probing in certain leadership principle, I had it all mapped out. Ownership, bias for action, invent and simplify. And I had my notes, and nobody said anything about it. I'm not cheating, I just came prepared. I came ready to go, right? That was a hard interview. Grammarly, very similar, is like, oh, okay, where was I empathetic? Where was I not empathetic, and what did I learn from it, right? So prepare for that. Now, how does that all make sense in terms of security when you build your case study? You can actually use, and I personally use this, the NIST CSF framework, right? So when you build your case study, you're showing the core values, you're showing your project most proud of, and so on. Now connect the dots, right? Security is, for example, a common thing I see is, what was the coolest bug you've ever, or what bug you're the most proud of? And then people are describing, oh, I found this bug, it was really cool, I filed a ticket and moved on. Did you actually cover that whole chain, right? Are you actually connecting the dots? You may actually get away with that in a pure vulnerability researcher, but that's early in your career, right? Even the most senior vulnerability searchers I've met actually connect the dots across all of them, right? So go deeper there. Actually really think through about identify, protect, detect, and response, and recover. Where did you start in that model? Where did you carry it over? Where did you learn? For example, I learned a tremendous amount around detection. I developed a tremendous amount of empathy on response and recover, right? I spent some time with those folks, start learning. So when I build my case study now, I really kind of structure that way. It's like, I started here, here's where I passed the torch, or here's where I carry over forward. And don't forget impact. What was the impact? What did you do? I kid you not, I meet many, many people. I always ask the same question. So if you ever interview with me, I'm giving you some freebies, right? What bug you're the most proud of? Why? And I stay back and I stay silent and I let the candidate dive into it, right? How much time did you spend, right? So I've seen candidates, for example, oh yeah, I spent several months, blah, 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 and then what happened? Oh, I filed a ticket. Okay, let me step back. Depending on how senior they are, I may ask a following question. Was that good use of time? You spent a tremendous amount of time finding this vulnerability. Why did you spend time there? Did somebody ask you? Was that your own gut feeling, curiosity? And you found this thing and then you just walked away? Was it fixed? Right? Is there mitigating factors in it? I threw that question back to someone. It's like, was that time, do you think that was time well spent? Not really, right? So kind of structure it and impact around the STAR method, which I highly recommend. It's very easy to use. What was the situation? Situation is we had this new hardware, or we had a new partner coming in, or we're trying to do a new integration. That's your situation, right? Your task, what are the tasks? Well, the task is we need to go evaluate, blah, 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 look at the vulnerabilities for this, and so on, basically do threat models. What are the actions that you taken? The action is I met with the engineering team, I've discussed with them, I looked at the timeline, I looked at what are the risk rating for that. Oh, there was no risk rating. What was the mental model I came up to help clarify and guide, right? So you can use a STAR approach in security interview plus, I'm so used to Surface where I just click, and then you connect it back there. Start showing impact, momentum, and so on. So that's extremely important. And I'm so frustrated. I meet candidates who I know, for some of them I know for a fact because I've worked with them before, and they fail to go deliver that impact, right? They fail to really kind of document that. And it's just a preparation. I know they've done it. I had a really solid candidate who I've worked for years recently, completely bomb in an interview that he should have passed his eyes closed. I know he can deliver, and he failed. And I was so upset because I was like, did you plan? Oh, we planned. I got nervous. I forgot to plan. Right? So, sure, question?
This guy could deliver, and if you knew he could do the job effectively, is it the failure of the interviewer? Because you didn't ask the right questions, and you didn't, showcase.
Well, I think in this case, I know him.
Here.
Question was, oh wow, that's loud. If you knew this guy could execute, you knew he could do the job well, but he did poorly on the interview, isn't it partially the interviewees or the interviewer's fault, like of not asking him the right questions or showcasing his abilities? Because you already knew the guy could do it, right? And why would you fail him on this interview if you already knew he could do it? Why did you make him jump through these hoops? You already knew that he could do the job.
Okay. Good. It's a good question. I could overrule everyone and say, screw this, I know better. I know this person, I hire them, right? But you're not focusing on bringing the person in the culture in there. Also, in this particular case, I exclude myself from the interview process. I know too much. They need to come in and fit in with the culture, right? It's not because you know someone exceed in certain areas. It's about actually gelling with the culture, right? Any company, and I won't name names, but I know some companies do that, right? Where they make offer with no interviews, more at the higher senior level. That is the biggest red flag for me. You have no idea who's in there. You got one toxic person, two toxic person, four toxic person, 10, 100, right? It's a company that's somewhere over there, right? So I got 5 minutes, 5 minutes. It's in this Bay Area, a long tenure, living on government contract for a long time. But anyways, so it's not because I know, but again, the skill of the interview is important, right? Am I frustrating that they didn't deliver because I would like to work with them again? Absolutely. But the company has core values, and that's what we're focusing on. Going back to, I'll take question at the end. Okay. Going back to impact. So don't forget that. Also, security is measurable. So around impact, extra point if you bring metrics. There was a metrics, I brought it from X to Y. There was no metrics, I created the metrics. Awareness is the beginning of change. Immediately after the metric was created, boom, we start making process. So really think through about metrics, vulnerability management metrics. What is time to discover? What is time to fix? Very easy, generally easy metrics, there's a depth to that. Detection coverage is one of my favorite one with more senior people. How do you actually measure detection coverage? It's a rat hole, there's no perfect answer. There's no perfect answer, at least I haven't seen one, but I sure tried it. There's a few metrics there. Detection tends to gravitate around velocity of execution and also quality of the SOP. When you write the SOP first, your detection tends to be a lot better, right? So we've talked about that. Understanding also who the customer is. Speaking the voice of customer, this is an Amazon trick, but it works at every company. Every company will work. Engineers is your customer. If you work on ProdSec, your customer is engineer, focus on that. If you work on enterprise security, everyone is a customer. Show the empathy towards the customer and understand what they're actually facing versus always saying they're stupid. I've had so many people who's like, oh, they don't get security. Don't say that in an interview. You're just failing to communicate. That's basically what it is, right? Do not forget also the me versus we. One thing I've realized where I'm failing personally in coaching is I've had several people I've supported before that reported to me in that past interview. And the feedback is they're way too humble. We don't quite know what they've delivered versus what the team has delivered, right? So I have to emphasize, like, this is a time for you. I want to know what you do. Connected back with the team later. Alone I move fast, together we move further. So don't forget, actually, the interview is about you. What have you done? I hear so many candidates saying, we did this, we did that. And we come in at the end, it's like, there's some good scenarios there, but we have no clue what that person actually did in a very consistent basis. So focus on you, we're interviewing you. Then roll back and how you contributed back to the team and how you supported the team. Very quick thing, I know I have a few minutes. Let's dive very briefly on more, I would say, skills. It is an absolute must in this day and age, learn to code. Right? How are you going to scale yourself? The environments are more and more complex, ephemerals, scale, so you have to code. Now, I'm not asking around building distributed networks and building distributed systems and so on. As simple as, I'll have an example, write a function that prints 0 to 1, and every time the number is divisible by 2, add an asterisk to it. They could not do that, right? Some of it were too nervous. There's practice round. Don't make the interview. The interview is game day. Don't make it your practice round, right? So you can go out there. There's interviewing.io and plenty of other companies where you can go do these things. I personally use it. I remember I did a few interviews. I think Meta was probably the hardest interview technically I've done on coding. I would have completely bombed if I didn't practice. Like facing a blinking cursor and like, please solve this algorithm. Like you have to do those, right? It wasn't in me. I practiced quite a bit. I was very nervous, but then it wasn't the first time I did it in front of them, right? So coding, learn to communicate. Learn to communicate as well. As part of your case study, most of the challenges you're going to face are not going to be technical. It's about actually driving change within organization and speaking. If all you're saying is doomsday scenario, they don't get it, they don't that. No, what you don't get is you're failing to communicate. So work on that skills. One of the most important skill as well is self-reflection. I emphasize on that self-reflection. What are your strengths? What are your superpowers? What are your weaknesses? At Grammarly, we have a very peculiar interview called Top Rating, where we walk through your entire career. Ask the same question. What was the role? What was the strength and weakness of your manager? What would you think your manager say about your strength and weakness? And why did you leave? for each job. We want to see self-reflection, thoughtful self-reflection. What have you learned? If you're saying your weakness is the same over and over, I had a case like that recently. It's very clear to me he's stagnating, right? That person is stagnating. So very quickly, I know I'm about to get booted off. Learn how to ask questions during interview. Come prepared with some meaningful question. It starts out with the recruiters initially. What was the role? What was the style? And so on. So very important. Don't ask about money. Talk to the recruiter first. I had a worst case scenario recently. Someone asked me, do you guys have food for lunch? Like, maybe I'm full of myself, but you're talking to the hiring manager and that's the only question you're coming up? He was strong technically, or that person was strong technically, but not really prepared, not the right audience. And learn to fail gracefully. I have candidates asking me, hey, where did I fail? But I know right away they're gonna challenge, they're gonna argue. It's not with good intent. You can generally ask people, officially they won't give you an answer. HR is there and so on. But you can reach out to the hiring manager and say, like, where did I do wrong? I'll make a call. If I feel it's genuine. Learning to say I don't know during an interview. I've had interviews like, I'm sorry, I have no clue there. And they were like, how would you approach it? Let's talk about it that way. So very important. And thank you. We're hiring. Very quick role, a security engineer. I'm desperately looking for a senior staff engineer on product security. I think generative AI, responsible AI is super hard. This is what I've been focusing on all week. I have a headache. So security engineer, threat hunters, we're looking, red teamers, we're looking. We're also hiring heavily in Europe, Germany, Portugal, and Poland as well. So look at the QR code, we have plenty of role. And more is coming in Q3. So anyway, I'm sorry. I know I went way over time. Okay.
Quick round of applause. All right, we have time for a question or two.
Yeah, going back to what this fellow said in terms of you had a candidate in front of you, he meets the criteria, but there's maybe one thing that he's lacking. And yes, you could have overridden everyone and gone ahead and hired him. You pretty much answered it. If he were to reach out to you gracefully and say, hey, look, where did I fail? Where did I stumble? Would you respond to him?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think the individual spend the time. I think treat people the way you would be treated. The interviews I completely bomb, I've asked. I didn't always get an answer. Some of them I actually got pretty good answer. Absolutely, I follow up. Legally, I cannot in an official capacity. Nothing stops from a quick conversation, a phone, not at all.
All right.
Mine is really quick. Just I was wondering if we're not talking about like a salary or whatever at the beginning of the basically interview, you're going to like 5 interview at the end when they offer you, it's not the price you're interested on. So isn't it better to ask at the beginning to have that whole conversation so both of us not wasting time than like you going to 10 interview and then it's like, oh no, sorry.
I think money and benefits is really focus those questions with the recruiter. If the recruiter doesn't ask you from the get-go, that's a red flag. You should. But once you commit to the interview, don't mention it, right? One of the top interviews I've actually seen people uplift the level just by asking the right question. I'll give you an example. At Grammarly, I wanted to focus heavily on scope. And I did a reorg before I even joined, and I defined my own scope, right? But I didn't bring this up until the complete end. I'm interested, let's talk now, right? Now, you may not have that quote unquote luxury early in your career, but focus on the scope. What can you learn from the company? Focus on the scope. The money will come at some point. You know, at the end, it's all about money. You got to go sign the deal. But if the money becomes the object of the conversation for every case, to me, that's just a red flag. That's just not how I hire personally. So talk about it, ballpark with the recruiter first, don't mention it. Shine, come prepared, make them interested in you. And if they tell you we're moving to offer, you already know. Now, right? Now negotiate. I've seen people also bomb at the end. Very cocky people. Oh, I've worked at so-and-so, I deserve X amount of money. It's like, I think the job you're looking for, you already have. Thank you. Right? I've had cases like that, and it sucks. And it's a time to reflect, how could we have caught that earlier? Because we also spent a lot of time, right?
Wonderful. Thank you, Sacha. Another round of applause.